Okay, you're a buyer, you're a seller. You found this piece of property if you're a buyer, you've negotiated the contract, you've gone through all that kind of stuff, and everyone's agreed, and now you have a signed agreement, and your deposit check is then put into an escrow trust account. What happens if the escrow fails to close? Who gets the money? How does it get out of a trust account? What is a trust account in the first place? That's what we're going to talk about today. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Rich Simonon. I am the owner and manager of the largest independent real estate company in Riverside, California since 1985. Our agents live and breathe this market every day, and what we try and do in these videos is give you information and answer questions that our clients ask us every day. Put your credit cards away. There's no books or tapes. We're just here to try and give you information. We hope it comes in handy. Today I'm going to talk about, in the unfortunate event that when an escrow fails to close, what happens to the deposit money, how does it get out of the escrow trust account, etc. So let's jump in. First of all, why have a deposit? Well, if you're a buyer, you got to have a deposit because you've got to show the seller that you're real. Without the deposit, it's just words and conversation on a piece of paper. The deposit shows that you are real to the seller. So you submit your offer with this deposit, and if the seller accepts it, then the deposit is placed into a trust account. 99 out of 100 times it's in an escrow trust account. Could be in a broker trust account, doesn't matter. Bottom line is the word trust is there, because a trust account is different from a regular checking or savings account. A trust account means there are some very strict rules as to what happens to that money when it gets in the trust account, and who can go in there and get it and who can't go in there and get it. All right, so let's talk about this. First thing I'm going to talk about is how money gets out of a trust account after it's been put in the trust account, because there are only 3 ways by law that you can get money out of a trust account. And you'll notice when I go through them, none of these 3 ways involve yelling at your agent, yelling at the broker, or yelling at your escrow officer. We do not have control over that money. We can't touch it. By law, we can't go near it. So don't yell at us, okay? Now, let's talk about how you get money out of a trust account. I said there's 3 ways. The first way that you get it out of a trust account, the best way to get it out of a trust account, and the way that's the most often done, is that buyer and seller agree what to do with it. You could decide that the money's going to go all back to the buyer. You could decide the money's going to go all to the seller. You could decide the buyer gets $2 and the seller gets the rest. You can make it a 90-10 split, a 50-50 split. It doesn't matter. Whatever the principals, which is the buyer and seller, whatever you agree to do with the money, if it works for you guys, it's going to work for everybody else. Once you have the agreement, and it's usually done verbally between everybody, once you have that agreement, then the escrow officer or the escrow company will write out a set of cancellation instructions. And those cancellation instructions are going to say, hey, we're going to cancel this escrow, it's not going to close, and the money that we have in our trust account is to be dispersed as follows. And then you write out whatever it is the buyer and seller have agreed to do. Buyer sign it, seller sign it, and the checks are cut accordingly, and everybody goes away, no harm, no foul. That's the best way. That's the first way to get it out of a trust account. But what happens if the buyer and sellers are yelling at each other and they can't come to any kind of agreement as to what's going to happen with this money? Well, then you move on to the second way you get it out of a trust account, and that is through small claims court, primarily through small claims court. Small claims court has a limit of $10,000, so if your deposit is $10,000 or less, which 99% of most deposits are, then you're going to go to small claims court. Somebody has to take somebody to small claims court. Buyer can take the seller, seller can take the buyer, doesn't matter. But you're going to go to small claims court, then you're going to stand up in front of the judge, and the judge is going to listen to what everybody's got to say. He said, she said, buyer should get it, seller should get it. Doesn't matter. You have your day in court, and then the judge will make a ruling on what's supposed to happen to the dispensation of the money that's held on deposit. That ruling will be in writing. Everyone will get a copy. You give a copy to the escrow company that has your money on deposit, and the escrow company is going to follow whatever the judge tells them to do. A couple of things you need to know if you go down the small claims court road. Number 1, okay, small claims court. I told you it's got a $10,000 limit. When you go to small claims court, the person that is doing the suing is the plaintiff. The person being sued is the defendant. Why do you care? Because if you're a plaintiff and you sue someone in small claims court and you lose, it's done, it's over. If you're a defendant and you get sued in small claims court and you lose, you have 30 days to appeal the decision if you think the small claims court judge was an idiot and wasn't paying attention. Therefore, it might be a situation that if you go down through small claims court, the escrow company could wait 30 days if it's the defendant that lost the small claims court action in case there's an appeal. That's what you need to know. The second thing you need to know is that in the purchase agreement, if it's your standard CAR purchase agreement, in there is a clause that says if the buyer and the seller can't work this out and someone has to go to small claims court, that the person who's doing the suing has the right to ask for the amount of the deposit plus an additional $1,000 if the other party has no reason that they haven't settled this. That is code for the fact that if you are simply being stubborn, if you're the seller and everyone thinks the money should go back to the buyer, but you're just being stubborn because you're not in the mood to give it back to the buyer because you didn't like what they did or whatever the deal is, if you're just being stubborn, not the time to dig your heels in. It might cost you an extra $1,000. Or same thing for the buyer. If the money should go to the seller and everyone says it should go to the seller, everyone agrees it should go to the seller, but you're going to dig your heels in, you know what, it could cost you an extra $1,000. So be aware of that and understand it. All right, I said there were 3 ways. Here's the third way. If you can't agree on it and no one takes someone to small claims court, you're going to love the third way it gets out of an escrow trust account. After 3 years, escrow is required to send the money to the state of California. What happens when it goes to the state? I have no clue. That's like a black hole. That's like 10 socks in a dryer and 9 come out. Who knows what happened to the pair of socks? We just all know the dryers eat them. Same thing with the state of California. They're going to take this deposit money and Lord knows what they're going to do with it, but it sure as heck isn't probably going to go back to anybody. It is amazing how often we have to do this. It's a process known as escheating. No, I'm not pronouncing the word cheating incorrectly. E-S-C-H-E-A-T for those of you who want to look it up because you want to look this kind of stuff up. Bottom line is after 3 years, the escrow company has to send it to the state of California and then it sort of disappears forever. It is amazing how often we have to do that. You'd think reasonable people could at least split it since it's going to be lost once it goes to the state. But what can I say? Bottom line is you see it happen enough. So the 3 ways you get it out of the escrow trust account. You agree on what to do with it, someone takes someone to small claims court, or the state of California gets to eat it. Now let's talk about who gets the money. All right, you don't have enough time for me to go through all the scenarios on what could or could not happen to escrow deposit money and who should not get it. We don't have that much time. So what I'm going to give you is a general rule of thumb here, and that's this. In the purchase agreement, generally, there's a default time period. It's 17 days in the purchase agreement, unless you guys changed it when you negotiated your offer. There's a 17-day time period where the buyer gets to figure out, do they really want to go through with this transaction? They get to do their inspections, do their appraisal, get qualified for the loan. The seller has to tell the buyer what things are wrong with the home. Everybody gets to check it out. It's sort of like an engagement period. You got 17 days, you're going to be engaged. At the end of the 17th day, everyone's got to figure out whether you're going to go through with this and get married or not. If indeed the buyer says, yes, I'm cool with this and I'm going to go ahead with the transaction, everything's cool, and you're going to sign up paperwork that says, I remove my contingencies, I remove the inspection contingency, the appraisal contingency, the loan contingency, anything else you might have had in there, I've checked it out and I'm good to go, then generally speaking, if the transaction fails to close for any reason on the buyer's side after the 17-day time period, hey, the seller could have a pretty good claim on that money. If, however, the transaction blows up prior to the 17 days, because maybe the buyer's uncomfortable with something, the inspections or whatever, then generally speaking, the money goes back to the buyer. Are there exceptions to what I just said? Oh my God, there's 1,000 of them. But as a general rule, your 17-day time period sort of generally controls who's doing what to whom and who's going to get the money back. You still need to sign for it. Escrow's still going to need to do the cancellations, and everyone's got to say, yes, we agree, the money goes here, the money goes there. But that's pretty much a rough idea of what can happen with that. There are some things that you can do. There's a liquidated damages clause. Would be the whole subject of another video that has to do with releasing of the monies to the seller. You could agree to release monies to the sellers during the course of the escrow. Again, 1,000 scenarios around it, but in general, if it's prior to the 17 days, the money usually goes back to the buyer. If it's after the 17 days, the seller's got a pretty good claim on it. All right. Hopefully that helps you. Hopefully you're not in the situation where you need to know this, but at least we're trying to give you some information and some answers, and we hope that this comes in handy for you. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and do not forget, be very careful out there. It's a goofy real estate world. We don't want anyone getting hurt with any misinformation. If you have any questions, call us. Otherwise, thanks. Have a great day.